Ambassador Hannah stood at the center of the great council chamber. Around her, hundreds of alien representatives sat in their floating seats. The room was shaped like a bowl, and she stood at the bottom, looking up at them all. She had stood here many times before. She knew every face, every species, every insult hidden behind polite smiles. High Counselor Varys of the Tyranni Empire was speaking. His voice echoed through the chamber like thunder. He was tall, with silver skin and 4 arms that moved when he talked. He was mocking her, again. "The humans ask us to spend resources on refugees," Varys said. He made a sound that was laughter among his people. How touching. How sentimental. "Perhaps next they will ask us to adopt stray animals from dying planets." The chamber filled with laughter. The Velen generals slapped their armored chests. The Tyranni nobles nodded to each other. Even some of the smaller species joined in. It was safer to laugh with the powerful than to stay silent. Hannah did not react. Her face remained calm. She had practiced this calm for 15 years. 15 years of serving the Galactic Council. 15 years of watching her people give everything and receive nothing. "Does the human ambassador wish to respond?" Varys asked. His tone suggested he already knew she would bow and accept the rejection. Hannah looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked around the chamber at all of them. The ones who laughed. The ones who stayed silent. The ones who looked away. She did not speak. She simply gathered her documents, bowed once with perfect dignity, and walked out of the chamber. Some of the representatives barely noticed. Others assumed she would return. A Tyranni aide made a joke about human emotions. The session continued, but Hannah did not return. 3 hours later, she stood on the bridge of a human transport ship. Her belongings were already packed. Behind her, through the window, she could see the great space station that housed the council. She had spent 15 years of her life there, "Ambassador," the ship's captain said. "We have confirmation. All human personnel have evacuated the station." "Good," Hannah said. "Take us home." The ship turned and jumped into faster-than-light travel. The council station became a small dot. Then nothing at all. At the same moment, across the galaxy, Admiral Taiho sat in his command chair aboard the flagship of the human fleet. He was a man in his 60s, with gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. Around him, officers worked at their stations in quiet efficiency. "Admiral," his communications officer said, "Ambassador Hannah has departed. The signal is confirmed." Taiho nodded slowly. He had hoped this day would never come. He had also known it was always coming. "Send the order to all human vessels, colonies, and stations," he said. "Operation Quiet Dawn is active. Bring everyone home." "All of them," sir, his first officer said. "That is over 4 million people spread across council space." "I know," Taiho said. "We have been preparing for this for 10 years. Every ship knows its role. Every colony knows the plan. Begin." Across the galaxy, human ships that had been waiting received the signal. Colony transports that had been loaded in secret began their launches. Space stations that had been quietly packed started their shutdown procedures. On the border worlds, Captain Minho oversaw the evacuation of 3 agricultural colonies. He was young for his rank, but he had earned it through years of hard work. Now, he watched as thousands of human families boarded transport ships. A young girl tugged at her mother's hand. "Why are we leaving?" she asked. "I like it here." Her mother knelt down and touched her face gently. "We are going home, little one." "To our real home?" Minho turned away. He did not want anyone to see the emotion in his eyes. By the end of the week, every human in council space was gone. They left behind their buildings, but took everything else. Every piece of technology they had created, every record they had kept, every tool, every ship, every medical device. They even took the communication satellites they had placed around the council's planets. They had installed these gifts over the years and no one had questioned it. Now, they were gone. And the council's communication network had gaps that no one knew how to fill. On the council station, a Tyranni administrator walked through the empty human embassy. The lights were still on. The doors were open. But every room was empty. Not even a piece of paper remained. He reported this to High Counselor Varys. "Let them go," Varys said with a wave of his hand. "They were useful workers, nothing more. We have 100 species who can replace them." Senator Kell of the Shivan people was not so sure. He was old, even by his species' long standards. He had worked with humans for many years. He had seen what they could do. "High Counselor," he said carefully, "perhaps we should send a message. Ask them why they left. Offer to discuss their concerns." Varys laughed. "Discuss? With humans? They are children throwing a tantrum because we rejected their silly proposal. They will return in a month, begging for their positions back." Kell said nothing more. He had learned long ago that arguing with Varys was pointless, but he could not shake the feeling that something had changed forever. That night, he stood by the window of his quarters and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the humans were traveling home. They had asked for so little, just dignity, just respect. And the council had given them nothing but mockery. He wondered what price they would all pay for that mockery. The answer would come soon enough. 6 months had passed since the humans left. At first, no one in the council noticed any problems. Life continued as it always had. Ships traveled between worlds. Trade flowed through the great commerce routes. The council met and argued and made laws. Then the translation errors began. The universal translation. Network was something everyone used but no one thought about. It was like air or water. It was simply there. When a Tirani spoke to a Velen, the network translated their words instantly. When a Shivan wrote a document, any species could read it in their own language. The network had been built by a human. Engineer named Doan. He had spent 20 years perfecting it. He had trained a small team of humans to maintain it. When the humans left, they took that team with them. Now the network was breaking. It started with small mistakes. A trade agreement between the Velen and the Lumi was nearly destroyed because the word partnership was translated as ownership. A Tirani insult was translated as a compliment, causing confusion in diplomatic meetings. A medical warning was mistranslated. 37 Shivan colonists took the wrong medication. Senator Kell brought this problem to the council. "The translation network is failing," he said. "We need to find people who can repair it." High Counselor Varys dismissed his concerns. "Then find them. Surely we have technicians who can handle such simple work?" But they did not. The network was built on principles that no one else understood. Doan had created something new, something that worked with the unique patterns of each species' language and thought. Other engineers looked at his code and saw nothing but confusion. The translation network was just the beginning. The trade routes that humans had patrolled were now empty. Pirates and raiders, who had stayed quiet for years, returned in force. A Tirani merchant convoy was attacked and destroyed. A Lumi passenger ship was captured. Its people sold as slaves on the Outer Rim. The Velen military was asked to patrol these routes instead. General Mott, their greatest commander, refused. "Our warriors are meant for battle, not guard duty," he said. "Let the weaker species protect themselves," so no one protected the routes. Trade slowed. Prices rose. Worlds that depended on imports began to suffer. On a small Shivan colony, Senator Kell walked through empty markets. The shelves that should have held food were bare. The medical center had run out of basic supplies. Children looked thin and tired. How did this happen? He asked the colony's governor. The governor, a young Shivan woman named Tali, pulled up records on her data screen. "The humans used to manage our supply routes," she said. "They calculated exactly what each colony needed and when. They made sure ships arrived on time. When they left, no one took over their work." "Why not?" Tali looked at him with tired eyes. "Because no one knew they were doing it. It was just one of the things they did, quietly, without asking for credit." Kell returned to the council station with a heavy heart. He began searching through old records, trying to understand exactly what the humans had done during their 15 years in council space. What? He found shocked him the humans had maintained 40% of all infrastructure across council territory. They had mapped every hyperspace route currently in use. They had developed water purification systems for desert worlds, agricultural techniques for poor soil planets, and medical treatments for diseases that had killed millions. None of this was recorded in official histories. The Tyranni had claimed credit for most of it. Human names had been removed from research papers. Human achievements had been listed as council projects with no mention of who actually did the work. Kel found a record of Dr. Sujin, a human scientist who had cured a plague that threatened the Lumi species. The official history said the cure was developed by council medical teams. Sujin's name appeared nowhere. He found records of Captain Minho's unit holding a defensive line for 3 days against raiders, saving a colony of 50,000 people. The official report credited Allied forces with no mention of humans. He found the original plans for the translation network. Doan's name had been crossed out and replaced with Council Engineering Division. The humans had known. They must have known. And yet they had stayed. They had continued to work, to serve, to sacrifice. For 15 years, they had hoped that things would change. They had been wrong. Historian Aura of the Lumi species was also searching through records. She was old and respected, known for her honest work. What she found made her feel sick with shame. She brought her findings to the council. "We have made a terrible mistake," she said. "The humans built half of what we depend on. We treated them like servants and took credit for their genius. Now they are gone, and we do not know how to maintain what they created." High Counselor Varys cut her off. "This is nonsense. The humans were a minor species. They did simple labor, nothing more. I will not listen to this propaganda." He ordered Aura to be silent. Her research was classified. No one was allowed to speak of it. But the problems continued to grow. On a Velen border world, a freighter drifted in dead space. Its navigation system, designed by humans, had failed. The crew did not know how to repair it. They sent out distress signals, but no help came. They drifted for 3 weeks before another ship found them. Half the crew had died from lack of oxygen. The ship's captain, barely alive, whispered to his rescuers, "The system just stopped working." And none of us knew what to do. None of them knew. That was the problem. The humans had done so much, so quietly, for so long, and now they were gone, and the cracks were only beginning to spread. 2 years after the humans left, the Galactic Council was falling apart. The translation network had fragmented into pieces. Species that had worked together for centuries now struggled to understand each other. Meetings that once took hours now took weeks. Simple trade agreements became impossible puzzles of misunderstood words and confused meanings. The Velen Empire, once the greatest military power in the galaxy, was losing a war against raiders they would have crushed 5 years ago. General Mott stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched another defeat unfold on the tactical display. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "These are common criminals, thieves and pirates. We should destroy them with ease." His aide, a young officer with fear in his eyes, answered carefully, "Sir, our fleet formations were designed with human tactical support. They handled our communications, our supply lines, our intelligence networks. Without them, we are fighting blind." Mott gripped the edge of his command console until his knuckles turned white. He remembered how he used to mock human caution in battle. He called it cowardice. He laughed at their careful planning and their endless preparation. Now he understood. It was not cowardice, it was wisdom, and he had been too proud to see it. On a dozen worlds, plague spread without control. Dr. Sujin had developed vaccines and treatment protocols that had saved millions of lives. When the humans left, they took that knowledge with them. Other doctors tried to recreate her work, but they did not understand the principles behind it. On a Lumi colony, historian Ara walked through a hospital filled with the sick and dying. She had come to document what was happening. She owed that much to the truth. A young doctor grabbed her arm. His face was pale with exhaustion and despair. "We found her notes," he said. "Dr. Sujin's research. We thought we could use them to make the vaccine ourselves." "And," Aura asked, "we cannot understand them. The science is beyond us. She was decades ahead of our best researchers, and we never knew. We never even thanked her," began to cry. Aura held him for a moment, then continued her walk through the hospital. She counted the dead. She recorded their names. Someone had to remember, the economy of council space was collapsing. Trade had slowed to a fraction of what it once was. Worlds that depended on imports were starving. Worlds that depended on exports had warehouses full of goods that no one could buy. The Turani Empire, which had once seemed unshakable, was cracking from within. Colonies demanded independence. Military units refused to follow orders from the capital. High Counselor Varys sent speeches and threats, but no one listened anymore. Senator Kell requested a private meeting with Varys. It was granted. Though Kell suspected, Varys only agreed because he had few allies left. The High Counselor's office was smaller than Kell remembered. Or perhaps Varys himself seemed smaller. He sat behind his great desk, but he looked tired and old. "You were right," Varys said before Kell could speak. "Is that what you came to hear? You were right and I was wrong. The humans mattered." "This is not about being right," Kell said. "This is about survival. The council is dying. We must do something." "What would you have me do?" Varys asked. "Beg them to return? Get on my knees before creatures I called inferior? If that is what it takes?" "Yes," Varys laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You do not understand, old friend. Even if I begged, they would not come. We had 15 years to treat them as equals. We chose to treat them as servants. Why would they help us now?" Kell had no answer. That night, he visited historian Aura in her small office. She was surrounded by records and documents. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep. "I found something," she said. "Something I think you should see." She showed him a classified file. It contained records of council meetings from years ago. Meetings where human requests had been discussed in private. The humans had asked for simple things. Recognition for their work. Voting rights in council matters. Fair payment for their services. An end to the policy of crediting their achievements to other species. Every request had been denied. Every time, the council had decided that giving humans any power would make them harder to control. They knew, Aura said. The humans knew exactly how we were treating them. They kept records of every insult, every stolen achievement, every broken promise. And still they stayed. Why? Kell asked. Why would they accept such treatment? Because they hoped we would change. They believed in the council. They thought if they worked hard enough, if they proved themselves enough, we would finally see them as equals. Aura closed the file. They were wrong. And eventually they realized it, so they left. They left. Without anger. Without violence. Without even a word of complaint. They simply decided that we were not worth their sacrifice anymore. Kell sat in silence for a long time. Outside the window, the great council station turned slowly in space. It had once been a symbol of unity and power. Now, it felt like a tomb. What happens now? He asked. Aura shook her head. I do not know. But I fear the worst is yet to come. She was right. In the months that followed, the Turani Empire collapsed into civil war. The Velen lost half their territory to raiders and rebels. The translation network failed completely, leaving species isolated and unable to communicate. And somewhere in the galaxy, far from council space, the humans watched. They did not celebrate. They did not feel joy. They simply continued building their new life. Far from those who had never valued them, they had left without a word, and that silence was louder than any war. 5 years after the humans left, the council made a desperate decision. They would send an expedition to find them and beg them to return. Senator Kell volunteered to lead the mission. He was old now, his health failing, but he felt he owed this much to the humans he had once worked beside. If anyone could convince them to help, perhaps it was him. His fleet was small, 3 ships, with crews made up of volunteers from different species. They carried no weapons beyond basic defense. This was not a mission of force. It was a mission of hope. Before they departed, what remained of the council gathered to see them off. High Counselor Varys was gone, dead in the civil war that had destroyed the Turani Empire. The new leaders were humbler, but it might have been too late for humility. "Find them," the acting council leader said. "Tell them we are sorry. Tell them we will give them anything they want. Just ask them to come back." Kel nodded, but he did not believe it would be so simple. The fleet traveled along old human trade routes. These paths had once been busy with human vessels. Now they were empty and dark. No one patrolled them. No one maintained the navigation beacons. After 2 weeks of travel, they found the first human outpost. It was a space station that had once served as a trading hub. Kel remembered visiting it years ago. It had been full of life and activity. Now it was a shell. The humans had taken everything. The walls were bare. The docking bays were empty. Even the light fixtures had been removed. Only the basic structure remained. Kel walked through the empty corridors with his team. Their footsteps echoed in the silence. "They were thorough," his aide said. "They left nothing behind." "They did not want any connection to us," Kel replied. "Can you blame them?" They continued their journey, finding more empty outposts and abandoned colonies. Each one told the same story. The humans had left nothing. No messages. No explanations. Just empty buildings and silence. After a month of searching, they found the border of human space. A single beacon floated in the darkness, sending out a repeating signal. Kel ordered it played on the bridge speakers. Ambassador Hannah's voice filled the room. It was calm and clear, just as Kel remembered. "To any who seek us, we ask for nothing but dignity. You gave us silence. Now we return it. This is the border of human space. You may not pass without permission. Any vessel that enters without authorization will be turned away." The message ended. It began again. It had been playing for 5 years. Kel ordered his fleet to stop. He recorded a message of his own and sent it toward human space. "This is Senator Kel of the Shivan people. I come in peace, with no hostile intent. I carry a message from the Galactic Council. I request permission to speak with your leaders." Hours passed, then days. Finally, a response came. A single human ship appeared at the border. It was larger and more advanced than anything Kel had ever seen. Human technology had clearly not stood still. A face appeared on the communication screen. Admiral Taiho looked older than Kel remembered, but his eyes were just as sharp. "Senator Kel," Taiho said, "I remember you. You were one of the few who treated us with respect. Admiral Taiho, thank you for responding. You may enter human space. You personally. Your fleet will remain here." "You will be given a shuttle," Kel agreed, without hesitation. The shuttle journey took 3 days. Kel spent most of it looking out the window at human space. What he saw amazed him. Human colonies dotted every habitable world. Space stations glittered like jewels in the darkness. Ships of all sizes moved along busy trade routes. Everything was clean, organized, efficient. The humans had not just survived, they had thrived. The shuttle landed on a world covered in green forests and blue oceans. Kel was escorted to a simple building overlooking a valley. Inside, Admiral Taiho waited for him. They sat across from each other at a plain wooden table. No servants. No ceremony. Just 2 old men who had seen too much. "The council is dying," Kel said. "Without your help, we may not survive another decade." "I know," Taiho replied. "We are prepared to offer anything. Full voting rights. Recognition of all human achievements. Payment for everything that was taken. Complete equality in all matters." Taiho was quiet for a long moment. Then he shook his head. "It is too late for that, Senator. We did not leave in anger. We left because we finally understood the truth. You would never see us as equals. Not truly. You would smile and sign agreements, but in your hearts, you would still see us as lesser beings. That is not true. We have changed. You have changed because you are desperate. That is not the same as truly changing." Taiho stood and walked to the window. "We spent 15 years hoping you would change. You did not. So we stopped hoping and started building something new." He gestured at the world outside. "We have everything we need here. Safety, freedom, dignity. We have made alliances with species the Council rejected. We have built a civilization based on mutual respect, not exploitation. And what about us? Kel asked. Will you watch us die? Taiho turned back to face him. There was no hatred in his eyes, only sadness. We will not attack you. We will not seek revenge. But we will not save you either. You must save yourselves if you can. He led Kel to a memorial hall nearby. The walls were covered with names. Thousands of names. Every human who died serving the Council, Taiho said. Soldiers, scientists, engineers, workers. They gave their lives for an alliance that never respected them. Kel read the names. He recognized some of them. People he had commanded. People he had worked beside. He fell to his knees and wept. Taiho placed a hand on his shoulder. You were kind to us, Senator. That is why I agreed to meet you. But kindness from one person cannot undo the cruelty of thousands. When Kel returned to his fleet, he carried no hope of rescue. Only the weight of truth. The humans would not return. The Council would have to face the consequences of its choices alone. 10 years had passed since the humans left. The galaxy had changed beyond recognition. Senator Kel stood before what remained of the Galactic Council. The great chamber that once held hundreds of representatives now held barely 50. Empty seats stretched into the shadows like wounds that would never heal. The Tyranny Empire was gone. Civil war had torn it apart, and its pieces had scattered into a dozen small, struggling nations. The Velen had lost so much territory that they now controlled only their home system. The Lumi had retreated into isolation, closing their borders to everyone. Kel was dying. His doctors gave him months, perhaps weeks. But he had one final duty to perform. I have returned from human space, he said. His voice was weak, but the chamber was so quiet that everyone heard him. I bring their answer. The remaining council members leaned forward. Some still hoped for good news. Some had already given up hope. They will not return, Kel said. They do not hate us. They simply feel no obligation to save us from the consequences of our own choices. A murmur ran through the chamber. Some representatives wept. Others sat in stunned silence. What are we supposed to do? Someone asked. Survive if we can. Learn from our mistakes. Build something new from what remains. Kel paused to catch his breath. And remember, we must never forget what happened, or it will happen again. Historian Aura stepped forward. She was older now, her fur gray and thin. But her eyes were still sharp, still determined. I have completed my work, she announced. The full history of human involvement with the Council. Every achievement they made, every insult they suffered, every stolen credit and broken promise. I call it the history of human departure. She held up a small data crystal. This will be distributed to every world in Council space. It will be taught in every school. Future generations will learn the truth. No one objected. There was no one left who cared about protecting old lies. In the weeks that followed, Aura's history spread across the galaxy. People read it with shock and shame. They learned about Dr. Sujin's cures that had been credited to others. They learned about Engineer Doan's translation network that no one appreciated until it was gone. They learned about the countless soldiers who died defending worlds that mocked them. On a small Velen colony, a teacher read the history to her class. The children listened with wide eyes. Why didn't anyone stop this? A young student asked. Why didn't someone help the humans? The teacher had no good answer, because we did not think we needed to. We thought they would always be there, serving us quietly. We never imagined they would leave, but they did leave. Yes, they did. And that is the lesson. No one is required to accept mistreatment forever. Even the most patient people will eventually walk away. On another world, General Mott read the history alone in his quarters. He was no longer a general. The Velen military had collapsed, and he had retired in disgrace. He read about the battles where human soldiers had held the line, battles he had dismissed as unimportant. He read about the tactics they had developed, tactics he had mocked as cowardly. He closed the book and stared at the wall for a long time. Then he began to write. A letter of apology, addressed to no one in particular. He knew the humans would never read it, but he needed to write it anyway. Senator Kell died 2 months after his report to the council. His final words were recorded by his aide. "Tell them I am sorry. Tell the humans I am sorry." The message was sent toward human space. No reply ever came. But somehow, Kell's aide felt that it had been received. Years passed. The former council space slowly stabilized. It would never return to its old glory, but it survived. New alliances formed. Old enemies made peace. The species that remained learned to work together in new ways. And always they remembered the humans. In schools across the galaxy, children learned about the species that left without a word. They learned about dignity and respect. They learned that treating others as lesser beings always has a price. On the anniversary of the human departure, many worlds held moments of silence, not celebrations, not mourning, just silence. It seemed appropriate, far away, in human space. Life continued peacefully. Ambassador Hannah, now very old, sat on the porch of her home on a colony world. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Fields of alien flowers stretched to the horizon. Her granddaughter ran through the garden with a group of children. Some were human. Others were from species that the old council had rejected and ignored. Here they played together without conflict. Captain Minho, retired now, sat beside Hannah. His hair was white, but his eyes were still kind. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked, leaving without a word. Hannah watched her granddaughter laugh and spin in the fading sunlight. She thought about all the years of service, all the insults, all the stolen credits and broken promises, all the hope that had slowly died. "We said everything that needed saying," she replied. "They just were not listening." Minho nodded. "And now? Now we are home. That is enough." They sat together in comfortable silence as the stars appeared one by one. Somewhere out there, the former council species were rebuilding their shattered civilization. Somewhere out there, children were learning about the mistakes of the past, and here, in human space, a new generation was growing up free from exploitation, free from disrespect, free to build something better. That was the real victory. Not revenge, not destruction, just peace. A young boy ran up to the porch. He was not human. He was one of the refugee species that had found shelter among the humans. "Ambassador Hannah," he said, using her old title with respect, "my teacher says you were there when the humans left the council. Is that true?" "It is true," Hannah said with a gentle smile. "Why did you leave? Were you angry?" Hannah considered the question for a long moment. Then she shook her head. "We were not angry. We were tired. Tired of giving everything and receiving nothing. Tired of hoping for change that never came." She touched the boy's shoulder gently. "So we stopped waiting for others to treat us fairly. We created a place where fairness was normal, and we welcomed everyone who wanted to be part of it." The boy thought about this. "So you won?" "No one won. But we found peace, and that is better than winning." The boy ran back to his friends. Hannah watched him go with tears in her eyes. Above them, the human flag flew in the evening breeze. It was not a symbol of triumph. It was a symbol of something simpler. Dignity. That was all they had ever wanted. And finally, they had found it.